You'll be pleased to know that there are only 6 slides to go, and for those of you that haven't already realised, I'm from Newcastle, so they also serve as subtitles. So, so it's just before lunch, so it would be good to have a little bit of participation. So before I start, can I ask how many of you in the room could say confidently that 100% of people in your organisations are competent? Could you raise your hand? Oh gosh, so bang goes my next question, which would be how many of you could demonstrate it? And I think to put that into context, if we think we had a brilliant presentation from Manoj at the start of the day, but how appropriate would it be for us if we were going into surgery to ask him how competent he was at delivering that surgery? It's kind of a taboo subject really, isn't it? And something that, you know, would be difficult for many of the people that work in our industries. But we know he will have been trained as a consultant, but how long was that and how often does he demonstrate his competence? So who can I ask? We've put the framework out for consultation. Can I ask you to raise your hands if you've seen it? Fantastic, okay. So about 20% of the room has already seen the framework. So what I'll do today is just take you through at a very high level. It is still available for comment, I believe. So this has been in progress for roughly the past 2 years, and the points I'll present to you today are where we've got to. So it is very, very high level, but if you can imagine to try and get an industry to align around something as contentious as competence is quite difficult. I think the one thing that we can take away from this is training does not equal competence. But quite often, how many of us receive tender documents and the like where we ask people to demonstrate competence and what we get is a mandatory training matrix. So why is this the case? So we know that competence is absolutely fundamental to the protection of people, our assets and the environment, and more importantly, the prevention of major accident hazards. And we feel that there's a need for a common approach to competence across the industry. We can say we understand what it is. We've heard demonstrations and definitions throughout the morning, but yet repeatedly we still see examples of training as competence. But looking at the legislation that we have in the industry, and I'll read this one to you, I find it quite amusing. The Health and Safety at Work Act 1974, it's the employer's duty to provide information, instruction, training and supervision as is necessary to ensure, so far as is reasonably practicable, the health and safety at work of his employees. His. God forbid should a woman ever run an organisation, however. And we know that from that it is our organisation's responsibility, or more specifically the duty holder's responsibility, to be able to demonstrate the competence of the workforce at any one time. But how do you do that when we can't seem to align on what competence is? So that's a key driver for the framework. And finally, it's the intent of the framework to offer some guiding principles. They are high-level principles, like the goal-setting nature of the regulations, of the legislation that we offer. It will not tell you how to make your workforce competent. It might offer some structure to that, but it will not tell you what to do. You cannot apply the framework as it is and have a competent workforce. It's a bit more complicated than that, which I guess is why we're all here today. So, where to start? I think I'm in danger of stating the obvious here, but we need to align on what competence means. So first of all, knowledge. The knowledge that we get from training, that we attend a training course. Skill, how we apply that knowledge through our experience on the job. And finally, behaviour. The combination of the three should give us competence. But if we look towards the bottom of the triangle, you attend a training course so long as you're alert, and I hope many of our guys and ladies are when they attend training, so long as you're reasonably alert, you can pretty well predict the knowledge that that person will have when they leave. And if they apply that knowledge, what they've learned, they should, and have the opportunity to apply it, have a relative level of skill. However, the unpredictable element is the behaviour. And if we take the example of the German wings pilot, we know that we could probably say that he was a very competent pilot in relation to the knowledge and the skill, but it was the behaviour that was the important facet in the tragedy that unfolded. So, key principle number 1, competence is all about the consistent demonstration and application of current knowledge, skills and behaviour against a defined performance standard. So we've already heard a lot about standards. We need a standard, whether it's an in-house standard or whether it's an industry standard. It is your checklist that you assure competence against. So who's involved? It's about the industry, all of us in this room, all elements of the value and supply chains. It's about all of us. We all have a part to play in this. And we need to play a part for the various regulators that we're responsible to. As organisations, it's our duty to adopt competence management systems. Ian, in his presentation earlier, said we all have a competence management system. I'm not going to put everybody on the spot, but do we all have a competence management system in place? And finally, it's about individuals who must commit to developing the required behaviours and competence for their position. But the two can go hand in hand because we know that competence underpins safety. It's the single most important thing. How could you perform safely if you didn't know what you were doing? But also in the environment, the sub $70 a barrel oil world of oil right now, you could say that we need competence to be efficient also. So it's really important, and it involves all aspects of the organisation. And the gentleman from Shell, you mentioned this morning that, you know, as an organisation we really need commitment to do this, and how many organisations really commit to competence. It's not the first thing people would aspire to do. You know, if you give your frontline operators a list of 10 things to do, competence is one of them, you can guarantee it's probably going to be number 10 at the bottom. So how do we get there, and how do we make it interesting? So we talk about competence, we talk about a competence framework. I think it's interesting to know, what does a typical competence assurance process look like? We all invest a lot of energy in assuring our safety critical elements, our equipment, but do we place the same energy in relation to assuring the competence of our people? People are often the last barrier to major accidents. So to look at a very, very simple and high-level 4-step process, it is about the assessment of capability. So when you hire somebody for a position, hopefully you'll have a role profile, and your interview will be a gap analysis against that role profile. So that's the very earliest stage. At stage 2, we look at an initial assessment. We've made an appointment. What does that individual need to perform competently in their role, or even perform in their role? So here you would have missed Bosiet and any critical training that you need before you start. Moving on to that, and the last 2 steps on the model, professional assessment and ongoing verification, I believe, or I think the group are aligned, is the area that we really need to focus on and get right. This is the assurance in role that really makes a difference. So professional assessments against the standards that we talked about. You could have a qualified assessor or a line manager. At least they need to be a subject matter expert. And their assessments also need to be verified by a person who is aware of the subject matter as well. The final area, ongoing verification, is how we address currency of competence. Like I mentioned earlier, if you were a surgeon and you achieved your qualification in competence, you could have achieved it 8 years ago. Technology changes at quite a high rate, so how on earth do we ensure that we're competent over time? So we distilled it down to a 4-step process, and the key principle here is to ensure competence remains current. We need a robust and rigorous assessment process in place to re-evaluate the changes, to take account of changes to both people, process and equipment. So I don't want to labour on this one too much because many of the presentations have alluded to it. But for me, a competency management system is about simplicity. So at the top, policy setting and objectives. In my world, do you have leadership support for your CMS? how high is it really on your leader's agenda? It cannot just be a box ticking exercise. We really need to get behind this because it takes a lot of effort to achieve. Planning, targets and responsibilities. Are responsibilities clear, and are there sufficient resources? I think we could ask around the room how many people in your organisations are responsible for competence, and I guess you could in most count it on one hand. So it's, do you have resources in place to support that? What standards will you adopt? Will you develop your own, or will you adopt industry standards? If you were to develop your own standards, then this could take a year, maybe more, to achieve. So what do you do? And then you need the audit process. Do you apply your standards consistently? And finally, how effective is your competency management system? And how on earth do you measure effectiveness of it? So an effective competency management system is an integral part of any business. So it should be there integrated into all of the processes, your operating processes, your HR processes, and your general management system. So finally, we have put this out for feedback, and we've had lots and lots of comments back. Some of them we've integrated into the framework and adapted it. If we get some more, we'll try and do the same. I do believe it's available via the website, Step Change website, yep. So benefits of the system, and these are words of the people that reviewed, not my own words. It ensures consistency across the industry. And one of the key drivers for this was that for people new to the industry, it defines a starting point. So if you want to develop competence in your organisation, what on earth do you do and where do you start? We had some positive feedback that Step Change recognises the need for competency. Thankfully, they've got a Competence and Human Factors group to work on it. But yet, somebody else made the comment, not my words, but some companies are expert and invest heavily. Others only pay lip service to this. And quite contentiously, not enough contractors taking competency seriously. So it's a worthwhile exercise, and competence should be recognised in the same breath as safety. And as mentioned earlier, I would take that a step further and say that you need competence to enable safe, reliable operations. So to close my session, we do have a competence working group working on the framework. We'd welcome your feedback. Suggestions for next steps we've had of things that we can do and take forward is to collect and share knowledge on competence systems. What do people have that works? I think in particular George's knowledge on safety critical tasks, taking that to safety critical roles. Developing a cross-industry approach to safety critical tasks. I think from my own personal experience in Maersk Oil, if we want to do that, then we'd have to bring in a consultant, we'd have to get them to go offshore, do all the work, but surely we can align on tasks across the industry and work together on this. And finally, understand and improve the competence requirements for safety critical roles. So that's an overview of the competence management framework.